How do folks, David here, and it is experimental video time, and we are going to be looking at DIY weathering powders. Now, this is something that I've wanted to try for a little while. There are certainly enough vehicles and things like that that need sort of dirt and dust just to finish them off. I've done a couple quite recently. There is this tank from the Sabbath Worlds Crusade Chaos Forces, and you can probably see those tracks are looking just a little bit too clean. They need to be dirtied up, as does the dozer blade at the front. And the last vehicle I did, this extremely clean buggy, realistically should have a little bit of dust on it. Now, the reason why I haven't experimented with it in the past is that the commercially bought ones are quite prohibitively expensive, and there does seem to be quite a bit of faff in terms of fixative agents and things like that. And realistically, because I want to be doing things, one, cheaply, and two, quickly, I needed an alternative. That video from Midwinter's Minis is the one that I am going to be modelling my attempts on. So let's get over to the workbench, get some gloves on, because it looks as if the prep work is going to be a little bit on the messy side, and we'll see what we come up with.
Righty-ho, the tools needed for this project are really simple. First of all, plastic Ziploc bag, pop your pastel in there, and when you're breaking it up, because you've sealed it, it's not going absolutely everywhere. Second, you need a tool for applying blunt force trauma to break up said pastel. Now, I am going to be using the blunt part of this meat tenderizer rather than that, because I don't want to pierce through the bag and, split it and get stuff everywhere. And as an optional extra, if you don't want to just store it in the bag after you've broken it up, get yourself a sturdy container. So before we get started breaking things up, let's do a quick price comparison between our cheap DIY stuff and commercially available. First off, you've got this, which is a 3-colour Tamiya set. They do A through to G of various colours, and you get a small powder, and the cost of this is more than these put together, as is this. Now, this is a single colour, obviously larger one. This is from Vallejo. I will be using this on some of the models because I do want a grey, and I just did want to do a bit of a comparison between commercial and DIY, so you can see whether or not there is actually any realistic difference. So why have I got two sets here? Well, it is because we made a little bit of a mistake, and I'll point this out because it's something that wasn't mentioned in Midwinter's Minis video. The correct one for making the powder are these. Now, these are soft pastels, really pigment heavy, and you break it up and it comes into a gorgeous powder form. They are labelled as soft pastels very clearly on the video, but he does not mention the fact that you can get a second type if you're going out shopping for pastels. Now, these ones were just from the dollar store and were really cheap, but these are oil pastels. Now, rather than a powder, it's kind of more like a crayon. Realistically, it's held together more with sort of like a wax type thing. I haven't seen these be used. I am going to try and see what I can get done with them, if they're appropriate in any way, shape or form. But for the effects that you will have seen, it's these soft pastels, they're the ones that you need. And again, when it comes to straight artist materials, Reeves is my manufacturer of choice. And in this case, the one that I am going to go for is this sort of nice desaturated tan colour. Pop it in the bag. Seal the bag up and then smack the bejesus out of it. Okay, the carnage is over and we have 2 bags of crushed up pastels. This one is the soft pastel, it's the powder one, and this one, which you can see is a different consistency, is the oil-based one. Now, the soft pastel, as expected, has turned into a nice fine particulate dust. Yes, there's still a few little granules in there, but they can always be smacked about a bit later on. Whereas the oil-based one, yes, there is a little bit in the way of sort of powdery stuff, but the problem is with it having that sort of waxy coat around the pigment, as you break it up, it'll break up fine to start off with, but then as you're trying to break it up finer, it actually compresses and sticks back together into larger clumps. However, I will see what can be done with this at the end of the day. If it's sort of like clumpy dirt and clods and things like that from, more sort of like all-terrain stuck in crevices, this may be of use. And this is what I'm going to be using as my test piece. It is that Bloodpact Chimera. Just take the turret off. And in the unseen part underneath, we'll see what kind of weathering we can get on those tracks. Now, I am going to start off with the oil-based one. Now, yes, there is a bit of powder on there, and I'm just using a nice soft bristled makeup brush. Load some of that on there. It's not particularly adhering. Let's see if I can kind of work it in a bit better. I mean, I am getting some stuff sort of like in crevices, but it is not particularly holding at all. Okay, so for the purposes of what we are going to be using it for, the oil-based pastels don't work. I'll have to have a think and see whether or not there is a different application that I can use that for, because there's some really nice colours. There's got to be some way of getting them to work in something. Onto the soft pastel. And that is going in far better. And it is definitely working down into the grooves and doing basically exactly what we want. All right, let's get some weathering done on the top side of this one. And it is quite powdery, and it does sort of, I guess, blow and flick around a little bit. But that is all fine, because this kind of dirt, well, realistically would. Work it up onto the top, get a bit more discoloration around there. And it's not too overbearing, but it has certainly made a bit of a difference between that and the undone side. Okay, I'll carry on with the rest of this model. Okay, that is a vehicle that has been suitably, subtly weathered. Just a little bit of dust, but certainly the tracks are no longer anywhere near as shiny as they had been, and that is all good. Now, the one thing about a powder is the fact that it does have the ability to rub off through use. So it's fine leaving it at this stage if it's a diorama that's never going to be touched. But for a playing piece like this, you do need to do something about fixing that powder in place. Otherwise, it's one, going to rub off, and two, get absolutely everywhere. And while there are certainly, well, relatively expensive commercial products that can be used to fix it in place, Midwinter Minis used this hairspray. So I'll give it a quick spritz with this, and we'll see, well, whether or not it does its job or ruins the Mini. And then I'm just going to take this and pop it outside in the sun to dry off properly. Now, unfortunately, what I can see is that the really sort of subtle dust has essentially been obliterated by the hairspray. Certainly there are areas like round the back there where it was a little bit thicker that has taken, but that sort of subtle dustiness is almost gone. However, I have used hairspray before as a fixative for doing 3D prints, so now that I've got a layer on there, why don't we see what happens if I recoat? So I've used hairspray essentially as a base coat for the pigment. Let's see if it'll stick a wee bit better now that there's something sort of more for it to adhere onto. And what I can say is that that was a little bit more successful. Sorry, I'll just take that turret off so that I can show you. The hairspray, put the hairspray on first. Essentially, you're using it as a clear glue, and then the pigment powder, your weathering powder, goes on top of it, and the hold on the hairspray essentially fixes it in place. You can't get away with massive lumps, but certainly it is not rubbing off. Okay, that is stuck in place, and it has that nice sort of matte, dusty finish that you're after. Obviously, if it's a real high use piece, by all means put a coat of gloss varnish over the top, or have a look at some of the commercial fixatives for it. But for the purposes of cheapness, that is very good. Just remember, hairspray goes on first, otherwise you're going to dilute and wash away the pastel powder. Hairspray goes on first, that acts as a glue, pigment goes on top. Alright, I'm going to have a go at another 2 models, and one of them is definitely going to be using the commercial to see whether or not there is any realistic difference. Alright, weathering done on this Chaos AT70, and I used a mix of this for the defect crevices and this for sort of like more the flat areas. And to be perfectly honest, it is very difficult to tell any realistic kind of difference in the effect. Obviously, yes, you can see a wee bit more of a build-up of the tan throughout the tracks. And the reason why I wanted to use the grey as well was because obviously the colour scheme for this is already a tan colour, so the weathering wasn't necessarily going to stand out all that much. But you can definitely see just on the front there where it does make a bit of a difference with sort of like the tan, sort of heavier dirt at the bottom, and then the grey, more sort of dusty stuff up the top. I am more than happy with that. But those 2 vehicles were very blotchy in their paint scheme, and weathering wasn't necessarily going to stand out all that much. So let's see what happens with this pristine one. Now, I will do a bit of tan around the mud guards. I'll do a bit of tan around sort of like the wheel hubs where, you know, decent clods of dirt can be expected to build up. And then it's going to be dust, realistically, this colour, just to add a wee bit of character around the rest of it. Let's see what happens. Okay, so quick spritz with the hairspray off camera. Just give it a wee bit of a chance to dry out there. Whoops, come back. And then we want some of this around sort of like the front area and areas where it's going to sort of build up. No, that's a good build up on there. Yep, happy with that, happy with that. Swap over to the grey and get this in and amongst the tyres. Now, one thing I should say, when you're applying it, you don't want to be using too heavy a hand, otherwise you're just going to kind of rub it off, but too light a hand and you leave a massive sort of excess, which again, you don't necessarily want. But a massive excess can be got rid of just like that. Let's go for around the back and certainly around the sort of underside there. And that is certainly making it look an awful lot more lived in. Just breaking up that really flat colour that we had on there. Might go a wee bit more on the tan, just around a few of the areas. Just sort of more around the front and the undersides. Yeah, that's brought it out even better. And certainly the one good thing about this is the fact that unlike, dry brushing the effect on or stippling it on, you've actually got that sort of really flat, dusty-ish look to it without any kind of brush marks or sponge marks or anything like that. That I'm very happy with. Okay, let's go take some photos and we'll do the outro.
Well, for a cheap alternative to the commercial products, I think those soft pastels work really well. I am very, very happy with the results from them. And just thinking about it, using a powder rather than trying to do dry brushing to create the same kind of effect, I'll be perfectly honest, it went on just far, far easier and quicker, which is all good. Anyway, that is about all we have time for in this particular episode. If you've found the video useful in any way, shape or form, then please do hit the like button. YouTube absolutely loves that. If you enjoy this kind of content and you haven't already, please do consider hitting the subscribe button because there's going to be more videos coming in the very near future. But I will leave you good folk to your own devices. Toodle-pip for now.